Hacking story. Watch this.
The NSA, for example, has all the fiber optic taps across the United States and even around the world, plus trace route programs embedded in hundreds of places all over the network. So I knew they would know if packets were being passed around the U.S. or outside the U.S. or anywhere in the world, they could trace them and see who got them. I mean, they did that several years ago with the Chinese hack. They came in and said it came from that building, I think, in Shanghai. Well, they could do the same thing with virtually any hack. So right away, I began to question that assertion that they were hacking into the DNC.
No, I had Bill Binney on my radio program. He said 99% certainty. 34-year veteran, NSA, that it was not Russia. Now, some news outlets have also been reporting that former U.S. spies doubt this Russia hacking narrative, including Bloomberg. They were in an article entitled, "Why Some U.S. Ex-Spies Don't Buy the Russia Story." Even the liberal Nation, they wrote a new report, raises big questions about last year's DNC hack. The Washington Times did the same thing. Joining us now, California Congressman Dana Rohrabacher. One, I want to give you credit. It is true that if there's one person on earth that would know the source of this, wouldn't it be Julian Assange of WikiLeaks? And isn't it true WikiLeaks has never been wrong in 11 years?
Well, I don't know if they've never been wrong, but I know that he's the ultimate source.
Never been proven wrong. And the material they've released.
Proven wrong. Oh, yeah. The things that he released were honest and truthful. Now, some of the things he released, I'll have to admit to you, I would have preferred him not releasing. I thought it was wrong, but you take a balance of what's happened. He's disclosed massive amounts of information of which the government's been keeping secret from us. And I think it's a good thing that American people have transparency in their government.
One thing, and I've interviewed him 4 times on radio and 1 time on TV, and I asked him numerous times, would you ever release anything that would put people in the field, innocent people, in harm's way? And he swore he would not. Are you convinced that that's true? Because I can't think of an instance. Can you?
Well, when you say it's whether or not someone is intentionally doing that, I certainly don't believe that he would intentionally put American intelligence or military people at risk. But some of the things that have come out, and I would have preferred, I would think, yeah, well, not only embarrassing, but perhaps it's something that would have been best handled behind the scenes. But our government and all governments around the world have tried to hide massive amounts of information about what they're doing from their own people. And I think that what we have in WikiLeaks is an exposure of those things that they want to keep secret.
You know, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, 3 times, 5 times. Allegedly, Julian Assange at 16, Kim.com at 16, hacked into the DOD, hacked into NASA. Now, he's 45. At what point is it America's fault that we have not built the cybersecurity to prevent that from happening? And at some point, do we blame our own government for its failure?
Well, I will just have to say that I don't think our government should have as many secrets as they have, and they've been keeping information from us. And Julian Assange's operation, well,
we should be unhackable after 35 years.
Well, we should be unhackable, but we should make sure that information that doesn't deserve to be secret should be available to the American people.
Okay.
Were actually people that belonged to the FSB, which is the former KGB. These are they're CIA, right? Russia's CIA. So these were people that were connected, and they received $500,000, and Bill Clinton specifically for a speech, $200,000 from a speech.
By the way, that speech came from a Russian government. The $500,000, which was twice his normal speaking fee, and it came from a Russian government-aligned investment bank, and it came at a time that seems suspicious, and especially in terms of the Uranium One deal.
Yeah, absolutely, and if you look at the hearing, Grassley held a hearing this year that focused in on this bank, and this is a statement from one of the officials, and as noted by Grassley in the letter that he sent to all of these people who have put these lawsuits against President Trump. He said, well, if you just look at this bank alone, Renaissance is a Russian investment bank whose senior officers include former FSB Russian intelligence personnel. As such, sources have described the bank as an extension of the Russian government, as most all of the banks in Russia are controlled in some manner by the Kremlin. Yet, mum's the word, nobody made a big deal about the fact that, former President Bill Clinton received $500,000 for a speaking engagement from these folks, and it was filed in a joint income tax return while she was Secretary of State. That should raise concern.
Well, look at Qatar. I mean, they donated $1 million to the Clinton Foundation on Bill Clinton's birthday while Clinton was Secretary of State. Hillary, the nation, was the recipient of approximately, $4.3 billion. And, here's the thing that really bothered me is, the Saudis gave $10 million, and that was a 97% increase, et cetera, of money that they had given in the past when she becomes Secretary of State. And, and she's the champion of women's rights and gays' rights and religious freedom, but look at how the Saudis persecute women and persecute and kill gays and lesbians and persecute Christians and Jews. So it's great hypocrisy, but it's probably a lot deeper.
True. And remember, there was a lot of concern, too. You mean Saudi Arabia, the majority of the 9/11, if we go back all the way to September 11th, 2001, they were from Saudi Arabia. Osama bin Laden was from Saudi Arabia. We know that there were a lot of issues in the kingdom with Wahhabism, which was the extreme form of Islamic belief. And so there were a lot of concerns there, and nobody really addressed those issues. We know we've been partnering with our Saudi partners and allies as well, trying to find a way to mitigate this, but we haven't been able to. If you just go back to Qatar really quickly, think about this. During that time, she got the $1 million for the Clinton Foundation on Clinton's birthday. They got eventually $4.3 billion worth of sales. They were the recipient of that. That was a 1,482% increase.
Wow.
Since prior to Clinton being Secretary of State. That's huge. So if you just look at everything and you line it up, Sean, there's a lot of questions there, and people need answers. Like you said, unfortunately, there's not a lot of people seeking out these answers right now, but we know Senator Grassley is one of them, and he is expecting to receive some responses to his letters from those that he sent them to.
All right. Well,
Ms. Eiffel suggests, is there any further reason to believe that what happened here was an attempt to avoid liability under what remains of the Voting Rights Act and the bail-in provision?
Well, I would just have to say that I agree with Ms. Eiffel's analysis on that. It was fairly extraordinary for the Justice Department to reverse that position after career prosecutors in the Civil Rights Division had for 6 years prosecuted very aggressively a claim with private plaintiffs that Texas had engaged in intentional racial discrimination in enacting its voter ID law, and in fact had prevailed through numerous federal court decisions before the new Justice Department had withdrew that claim. It was an unprecedented action that I think very much was an effort to avoid bail-in, and it just turned out that the federal courts that then continue to consider the decision disagreed with this Justice Department and vindicated the career lawyers. It was also notable that none of the career lawyers who had actually toiled away for years on that case through trials and hearings.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Comey, I just want you to know that I have great respect for you. Senator Cornyn and I sit on the Judiciary Committee, so we have occasion to have you before us. And I know that you're a man of strength and integrity. And I really regret the situation that we all find ourselves in. I just want to say that. Let me begin with one overarching question. Why do you believe you were fired?
I guess I don't know for sure. I believe I take the president at his word that I was fired because of the Russia investigation. Something about the way I was conducting it, the president felt created pressure on him that he wanted to relieve. Again, I didn't know that at the time, but I've watched his interview. I've read the press accounts of his conversations, so I take him at his word there. Now, look, I could be wrong. Maybe he's saying something that's not true, but I take him at his word, at least based on what I know now.
Talk for a moment about his request that you pledge loyalty and your response to that and what impact you believe that had.
I don't know for sure, because I don't know the president well enough to read him well. I think it was, first of all, our relationship didn't get off to a great start, given the conversation I had to have on January 6th. This was not, this didn't improve the relationship because it was very, very awkward. He was asking for something and I was refusing to give it. But again, I don't know him well enough to know how he reacted to that exactly.
In my experience, Hillary has always been a frothing cauldron of bitterness and anger and blame of other people. Like a volcano, it looks like a nice, pleasant mountain and would be nice to hike on it, but underneath, inside, the molten lava is just going crazy and boiling and waiting for a chance to erupt and shoot out onto the surface. This characteristic is very evident in her new book, What Happened, in which she really lets herself go and goes after everybody in politics, except herself. The key, however, is that when you look at this, you get a clear grasp of her worldview in a way that her policy positions or her self-serving statements never really help us to do. So let's go through the charges she makes to see the insights that it offers into her character. One prominent among them is this, what she calls a phony email scandal. And she says that Comey cost her the election by reopening the investigation and raising the issue in the first place. And she said that the Congress and the media kept this issue front and center. She blames Matt Lauer for raising it during her first candidates forum. She says it was a dumb mistake, but a dumber scandal. She just does not understand and does not get that when you have a reputation for secrecy, you can't govern with secret emails. You can't have a server that the public doesn't access, and you have no idea what's on it. But more importantly, she won't admit to herself the fundamental truth, which is the reason she had that server, that secret server that triggered this entire scandal, was because she was doing something fundamentally corrupt at the State Department. She was trading favors for money for the Clinton Foundation and for Bill's speeches. And exposing her emails to public view would have been like a smoking gun exposing that scandal. She blames Bernie Sanders for doubting her integrity, but she doesn't blame herself for not having integrity and for doing stuff that would excite the suspicions of the most benign person in the world. She blames Jill Stein, the Green candidate, for diverting votes, as opposed to her own failure to be sufficiently aggressive on the environmental issues, the issues that animated Jill Stein. She goes after WikiLeaks and Julian Assange, but she doesn't mention that if those emails didn't exist in the first place, their release would not have hurt her. It's the scandal that's the problem, not the cop that uncovered it or released the evidence. And then she blames the Electoral College system for meaning the overcoming the popular vote. But she doesn't understand that in those northern blue states, decades of neglect by the Democratic Party had finally metastasized into an incredible anger that dominated the politics and the election in those states. And she never recognized it, she never got it, she never responded to it. She never understood what it was. It hit her completely blindsided because she didn't even know it was coming.
27th of this year. Have you ever had a one?
That I better hope there's not tapes. I woke up in the middle of the night on Monday night, because it didn't dawn on me originally, that there might be corroboration for our conversation.
Of laws, and those laws must be, Madam Speaker, and I take to the floor of the House today to support President Trump's decision as it relates to DACA. America must be a nation of laws, and those laws must be passed by the Congress. This is the promise made in our Constitution and ensured by our enduring liberty. President Obama was incorrect to unilaterally act in this program. President Trump is correct to put the power back in the hands of the people's representatives. America must also be a nation of borders, and we erode the virtue and value of those borders when we draw people across those borders illegally. There is nothing compassionate about telling the rest of the world that so long as a child arrives here, that child will be treated as if they have the same virtues and values of American citizens if they committed the criminal offense of entry into the country. Challenges we've seen with undocumented minors being sent has created humanitarian crises, and I believe that DACA and other programs that draw those across our borders illegally have contributed to those crises. I support the president. We should end DACA, and I yield back.
I misunderstood. I apologize. We briefed the congressional leadership about what Americans we had opened counterintelligence investigation cases on, and we specifically said the president is not one of those Americans.
Good afternoon, this is Amazon Jude coming to you from Wyoming, and looks like the Lame Street media has pretty much lost its appeal for pretty much the entire population of the United States. They're now back to rehashing old stories and just making them up. Best one today was by the Hill. I like to call him the Swill, because that's the only one that the congressmen in them think is honest, and it's turned out to be quite the shit-stained paper. Of course, it has been for a long, long time. There is no real news out there, boys and girls. I hate to break the news to you, but there isn't. And that's why we have to solely rely on each other and our own research. So when you read something, please, please, please do not pass it on unless you've researched it and know exactly the realities to it, because all it's doing is basically pissing people off and confusing them. And, you know, Sarah, today's Saturday. She should be at home relaxing with her kids. Instead, she has to go on Twitter and get rid of another bogus story written by the Swill. The Democrats are pretty much in panic mode, and so is the deep state. They know now that Mueller and them guys are not doing this for the correct reasons. They're doing it to try to figure out how to impeach Trump, because the longer he's in office, the more apt, the more the corruption will be exposed. And this would bring down the government after 80 years of corruption. So they're pretty much panicking over that. You got your, what is it, MSN News? The only reason I use it is because it's my opener to get to other web pages. If I could find something better, I won't support Google and I won't support Facebook or any of those as browsers. Not even Yahoo. Yahoo is another one of those. It would be interesting to see actual news anymore. But anyway, getting back to the program here. On MSN news site, it starts out, to make their tax plans work, GOP eyes a favorite blue state break. Okay, what they're trying to tell you is that all you moms and dads that get your income tax returns, they're going to try to tell you that Trump's going to take your $3,000 per kid head of household money away. That's where that's going to head, which is probably not true. And I would doubt it would be true anyway, because that would take really, really big tax reform, and I don't think they're looking to do something like that. The Paris Accord. Now the Swill saying, oh, he's going to get back into the Paris Accord. No, he's not. Not unless it's in the best interest of the country. So, the Hill, you can go pound sand up your ass today, big time, dudes. I've been thinking a lot about this immigration and how everybody continues to fight against the border wall and don't want it because of some butterfly or some tsetse frog might not be able to make it over to his home ground to get horny. But I want to take you millennials back a little bit. I know your teachers aren't teaching you this in school, but it's something that we 50-something-year-olds learned in school before it got all propagandized with how great Muslims are and how great devil worshipping is, and Common Core and all this crap that's going to screw up for the next 2 generations unless you kids stop paying attention to these liberal-ass teachers and actually research something besides your smartphones and your laptop. Back in, I believe it was close to the 16 or 1700s, when Europe was fighting a plague, and it was called the bubonic plague. Rats on ships that came over to Europe bringing goods and services and slaves had rats that carried this plague. So when the ships hit the shore, the rats got off naturally, and it killed, I don't know, million or hundreds of thousands of Europeans, because it just didn't spread to one, particular state, or I guess one particular area. It went all across Europe and killed millions of people. And the point that I'm bringing up to this is, if you notice in the United States, we've got typhus, scabies, tuberculosis, mumps, leprosy, all of these mumps, or I'm sorry, not just mumps, but all of these diseases that have been cured in the United States for decades, through immunization. When I was a kid, you got 7 of them. It was like mumps, rubella, polio. 7 of them. I can't even remember them anymore. But I still have the brown spot on my arm from when I was in school. And they used a gun back then because it was like, I think it was the polio 7-way shot, kind of like what they do cats when you take them to the vets, or dogs go to the vets. They have a 4-way vaccine that does several different diseases. Well, that's what we got. And I'm 54, and I still remember it. I never saw that mark on my child. And he's 31 now. And I went back and counted through how many vaccines he had to have by the time he was 18. So I had 7. He had 18, and now the requirement is 47. What are we vaccinating against? You know what it is? We're vaccinating against people who are coming into this country from countries that have not taken advantage of the vaccines of the world that were available for decades already to vaccinate their populations. And then when wars break out or whatever, they all run, it's like a ship, and all the rats run to one side of the ship and the other side's up in the air while the other ones are sinking. But it's the same thing. Okay, so the point I wanted to make on this more than anything is the fact that in 65 or 63, if I can, I was just born in 63, but I can remember my mom and dad talking about, because he was German, his grandparents were German, and they came over from Germany. They had to have vaccinations before they could enter the United States. Why are we not requiring this for these refugees and these illegals? This is like poisoning your own well. When they walk into the United States and they've never ever had a vaccination, and they're carrying these diseases, how long do you think it's going to spread to the general population of the parents that do not want to vaccinate their children with 47 vaccines?
James Comey drafted a conclusion apparently exonerating Hillary Clinton in the email case 2 months before the investigation was over and before the FBI interviewed Clinton aide Cheryl Mills, IT specialist Brian Pagliano, and Clinton herself. The FBI transcripts from interviews with 2 senior Comey aides are now coming to light after a records request from the Republican leaders on the Senate committee. They said it appears that in April or early May 2016, Comey had decided against criminal charges before 17 interviews were complete. Writing to the FBI, the senators added, "Conclusion first, fact-gathering second. That's no way to run an investigation. The FBI should be held to a higher standard."
Hey, this is Amazon Jude coming to you from Casper. I was scrolling through the net and came across one of my favorite guys to watch. And you know what the Democrats have planned for tomorrow while everybody's being distracted with the eclipse and stuff across America? They introduced a resolution, and it's co-sponsored by nearly 80 members of Congress and cites specific actions. Let me read this to you. The representatives believe our reason for censure of the President of the United States. They claim, whereas President Trump's immediate public comment rebuked, meaning when he said many sides for the violence down in Charlottesville, Virginia, and he failed to specify and condemn Unite the Right rally or cite white supremacy neo-Nazi gathering as responsible for actions of domestic terrorism. Whereas President Trump had surrounded himself with, cultivated the influence of senior advisors and spokespeople who have long histories of promoting white nationalist, alt-right racist, and anti-Semitic principles and policies within the country. Third one, whereas President Donald Trump has failed to provide adequate condemnation and assure the American people of his resolve to opposing domestic terrorists. You want to talk about some fucking nuts? The ones that are introducing the bill, Nancy Pelosi. I don't know if anybody remembers this, but I certainly do. This woman is part fucking nutbag and part crook. And what they are is they're worried because now that Jeff Sessions is starting to investigate
Tea Party cases to undergo a multi-tier review.
On the advice of my counsel, I respectfully exercise my Fifth Amendment right and decline to answer that question.
Ms. Lerner, in June 2011, you requested that Holly Paz obtain a copy of the tax-exempt application filed by Crossroads GPS so that your senior technical advisor, Judy Kendall, could review it and summarize the issues for you. Ms. Lerner, why did you want to personally order that they pull Crossroads GPS, Karl Rove's organization's application?
On the advice of my counsel, I respectfully exercise my Fifth Amendment right and decline to answer that question.
Ms. Lerner, in June 2012, you were part of an email exchange that appeared to be about writing new regulations on political speech for 501c4 groups, and in parentheses, your quote, off plan in 2013. Ms. Lerner, what does off plan mean?
On the advice of my counsel, I respectfully exercise my Fifth Amendment right and decline to answer that question.
Ms. Lerner, in February of 2014, President Obama stated that there was not a smidgen of corruption in the IRS targeting. Ms. Lerner, do you believe that there is not a smidgen of corruption in the IRS targeting of conservatives?
On the advice of my counsel, I respectfully exercise my Fifth Amendment right and decline to answer that question.
Ms. Lerner, on Saturday, our committee's general counsel sent an email to your attorney saying I understand that Ms. Lerner is willing to testify, and she is requesting a 1-week delay in talking to the chairman. Excuse me. In talking to the chairman, wanted to make sure that was right. Your lawyer, in response to that question, gave a one-word email response: yes. Are you still seeking a 1-week delay in order to testify?
On the advice of my counsel, I respectfully exercise my Fifth Amendment right and decline to answer that question.
Ladies and gentlemen, seeking the truth is the obligation of this committee. I can see no point in going further. I have no expectation that Ms. Lerner will cooperate with this committee, and therefore we stand adjourned.
Chairman, I have a statement. I have a procedural question, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I have a procedural question. Mr. Chairman, you cannot run a committee like this. You just cannot do this. We're better than that as a country. We're better than that as a committee. And I want to ask the question, what are we hiding? What's the big deal? May I ask my question? May I state my statement?
You're all free to leave. We've adjourned, but the gentleman may ask his question.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I have one procedural question, and it goes to trying to help you get the information by the way that you just asked.
What is your question?
Let me say what I have to say. I've listened to you for the last 15 or 20 minutes. Let me say what I have to say. Chairman, I have one procedural question.
Ms. Lerner, you're released. You may.
But first, I would like to use my time to make some brief